Sentire Media.
Hello, you. You're listening to A History of Italy. Episode 178. New triumphs for Cesare and Naples under threat. Again, 1500 to 1501.
Lasci colli nelle valli, tra due salici piangenti, io ritrovo la speranza di un amore che ormai fu.
Before we were distracted by the return of Ludovico il Moro to the Duchy of Milan and then his definitive downfall, we were following the start of the military campaign of Cesare Borgia, son of Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, as father and son attempted to carve out a duchy in the Romagna area. In that same episode, 176, we also spoke about what Romagna actually means. Continuing the conquest, however, was not going to come cheap, so the Borgias needed some readily available cold, hard cash. Since Daddy was the Pope, the easiest solution was to make some new cardinals who would be happy to show their gratitude by filling up the papal coffers. Translated, the Borgias engaged in the age-old practice of selling ecclesiastical offices, i.e. simony, getting not one, not two, but 12 new cardinals. So, with the finances sorted out, Cesare could get back to business. This time round, he was focusing his efforts further south in what is today the region of the Marche, with the city of Pesaro in his sights. At the same time, he still had an eye on Romagna and Rimini in particular. Now the Lord of Pesaro was an old acquaintance of ours, Giovanni Sforza. You, my dear constant listener, will remember him. He was the first husband of Cesare's sister, Lucrezia, and had been bullied into declaring he was impotent so that the marriage could be annulled. This despite the fact that Giovanni Sforza had had children before the annulment and would have more after. He was simply no longer useful to the politics of the Borgias. So Giovanni Sforza kind of already had a reason not to be too big a fan of the Borgias, and another one was coming. Sforza was a descendant of a cadet branch of the Sforza, his grandfather being a brother of the Francesco Sforza who would become Duke of Milan in 1452. Giovanni was the third Sforza to rule Pesaro. They had taken the city from the Malatesta of Rimini in 1445. Giovanni Sforza was getting ready to defend his reign from an attack by Borgia, but never really got a chance. Because on the 11th of October 1500, revolt broke out in Pesaro, and Giovanni was forced to seek refuge in the fortress of the city. He left the next day for the safety of Ravenna under the influence of Venice, leaving the control of the city to his illegitimate brother Galeazzo Attendolo di Cotignola. It was enough for Cesare to send one of his men, Ercole Bentivoglio, with a few dozen knights to the city, which Galeazzo Attendolo promptly handed over after sending Giovanni's mum and his most precious belongings to safety. On the 27th of October, the new Lord of Pesaro, Cesare Borgia, entered the city. It was not long before he was also entering Rimini, although at first it seemed like it would have been more difficult. We know that the Lord of Rimini was Pandolfo IV Malatesta. He had a contingent of about 1,000 men at the command of the condottiero, the military leader Bartolomeo d'Aviano. There was also a complex system of walls and towers that would make the city difficult to take. Pandolfo sent off his wife and children to the safety of Bologna, then closed himself up in Castel Sismondo just outside the city, which today is home to the Federico Fellini Museum. At this point, one might expect some heroic Caterina Sforza-style last stand, but Pandolfo saw the writing on the wall, agreed to terms, and gave up Rimini. On the 30th of October, Cesare Borgia entered there as well. The ease with which city after city had fallen to Cesare, Imola, Forlì, Pesaro, Rimini was an interesting indication that we can't really view the conquest as unscrupulous and ambitious Borgia ruthlessly conquering and oppressing the free people of the Papal States. Indeed, many citizens in many cases were not at all unhappy to get rid of their local lords, who often suffocated them with heavy taxation and at times ruled with an iron fist. You will, of course, remember Caterina Sforza's brutal reaction to the assassination of her second husband, Giacomo Feo. In short, the situation was very far from black and white in one direction or another. That's not to say, of course, that Cesare was a heroic liberator who wished to bring peace and freedom and flowers and butterflies to the people of a new duchy. Having mentioned our old friend Caterina, the next city in Cesare's sights lay between her ex-lands of Imola and Forlì, and that was Faenza. The young lord of Faenza was also Caterina's son-in-law, Astorre Manfredi, husband of Caterina and Girolamo Riario's daughter Bianca. It had been during the wedding procession for the two that Giacomo Feo had been attacked. In the case of Faenza, the people of the city actually liked their 15-year-old Lord Manfredi, Astorre III, and what's more, didn't like the Pope or want to be under papal control, so they were willing to resist. In November 1500, Borgia laid siege to the city. The siege lasted for 6 months, but in April 1501, they surrendered and Astorre Manfredi was taken prisoner and carted off to Rome. He was murdered the following year. Cesare was on a roll, and it really looked like he would manage to get everything he wanted. He would have liked to set his sights on Bologna next, ruled over by the Bentivoglio family. Indeed, he had sent one of his most trusted and successful generals, Vitelozzo Vitelli, to take the surrounding towns of Castel San Pietro Terme, Gatteo, and Castel Guelfo di Bologna. That is when the French king, Louis XII, put his foot down and said that enough was enough. Perhaps he didn't want a powerful new duchy sitting right on the border with his brand new spanking Duchy of Milan. So Bologna, as well as Modena, Reggio Emilia, and Ferrara, belonging to the Este, acted as a nice little buffer zone. Daddy Pope Alexander VI was very proud of his little boy and felt it was time to declare him Duke of Romagna. We mentioned Vitelozzo Vitelli, and it's worth spending a few words on him as he'll pop up again, and not in the best of situations with Cesare Borgia. First of all, you know how I love funny Italian names, and he was of the Vitelli family, the bullocks, as in young bulls. His name was Vitelozzo, Big Bullock, so he was Big Bullock Bullocks. Vitelozzo tied in very well with one of Cesare's long-term plans to expand his baby duchy, taking over the Republic of Florence. This is because Vitelozzo had a deep hate for the Republic and had sworn vengeance, as they were responsible for the death of his brother. So, flashback time. The Vitelli brothers had fought under Charles VIII, then for Pisa, then against Pisa for Florence. The condotta, the contract with Florence of two Vitelli brothers, in particular Vitelozzo and Paolo, had been stipulated in 1498. Florence at the time, after the agitation of the years under the Dominican monk Girolamo Savonarola, was living a period of relative tranquility, under a new council of the Republic, headed by a gonfaloniere for life, Piero Soderini. Piero de' Medici was still plotting and planning to get back in, but without much luck. The only bee that Florence really had in their bonnet at this time was regaining control of Pisa, and that is why they used their new formidable generals, the Vitelli brothers. However, despite taking the key fortress of Stampace, the Vitelli brothers did not proceed with the siege of Pisa, and, stating a lack of sufficient artillery, withdrew. The Florentines were furious and smelled a rat. They accused the brothers of treason. Vitelozzo managed to escape capture. His brother Paolo was not so lucky. He was captured, tried, and beheaded. Florence had made a mortal enemy of Vitelozzo Vitelli. He made his way to Milan to ask French King Louis XII for vengeance against Florence, and it is there that he met Cesare Borgia and entered into his service. This brings us back to our timeline. After Vitelozzo had taken the fortresses around Bologna, he was ordered to stop. He did take a little more time at that point to go and do some more Florence bashing by moving into Tuscany and besieging Piombino. But then Vitelozzo and Cesare were needed elsewhere, in Naples. Things had been bubbling along on an international level, and now the second part of Louis XII's plan was about to get going. There was a highly significant difference from when Charles VIII had tried the same thing. Back then, he had reached an agreement with the Spanish, who had said, "Okay, Charles, you go ahead and do your thing, we'll just sit back and watch." This time around, things were different. The King of Spain, Ferdinand of Aragon, the most Catholic husband of Isabella, who were now starting to make money big time thanks to the new colonies in the New World, felt that his claim to the Kingdom of Naples was much better than the ruling king. The ruling king was Federico, uncle of the dead Alphonse II. So there was a bit of a prickly situation. We had two foreign kings who had a legitimate claim to the Kingdom of Naples, due to Queen Joanna II of Naples nominating first the Aragonese, then the Angevin French, as her successor back in the early 1400s. Things could have gotten nasty straight away, but for the moment, the two pretenders decided to play it diplomatically. So between the 10th of October 1500 and the 11th of October of that same year, the two monarchs, Louis XII and Ferdinand II, sneakily met in secret in Granada to set out an agreement. Since it was in Granada and secret, some bright spark decided to call it the Secret Treaty of Granada. The gist of the agreement was that the two would split up the Kingdom of Naples. Louis would get the northern part of the kingdom, consisting more or less in the modern-day regions of Campania and Abruzzo, and would be the king of the Kingdom of Naples. Alphonse would get Calabria and Puglia, so the toe and the heel of the boot, and have the title of Duke of Calabria, which was the title that the firstborn son of the King of Naples had had until that point, like the Prince of Wales in the United Kingdom. Then there was the important question of sheep. You see, there was a lot of sheep herding going around in the Kingdom of Naples, and when the animals were moved from one area to the other with a change of season, customs taxes had to be paid by the sheep herders, not the sheep themselves. A lot of money came out of this, and the Agreement of Granada determined that that money would be split 50-50. How could anything go wrong? It did not take a Machiavelli to see that this was a recipe for disaster, and that neither side was likely under any illusion that the deal would last. There were whole areas of the kingdom, such as Capitania and Basilicata, that were not even mentioned. Who were they going to go to? I have added a map to the show so you can have a look and see what's going on. The Secret Treaty of Granada would seal the fate of Naples and set the scene for the Italian Wars to ramp up to a whole new level. Thank you very much for listening. A History of Italy podcast is a Sentire Media production, created and hosted by me, Mike Corradi, and produced by my wonderful Patreon supporters, whom I would like to thank, starting from the first half of the Margherita Hack and Galileo Galilei level. And they are Alison H., Amanda D., Annie, Anthony G., Karsten, Catherine C., C. Lane, Cindy M., DB, Dean V., Demetrio M., Dennis S., Dominique T., Emily B., Eric W., Eviam, Federica R., Gabriel S., Greg, Gunnar, and Ignazio. And of course, we cannot forget the tippy-top Maria Montessori and Dante Alighieri level, Lisa K., Andrew M., Peter W., David L., David C., J.W., Sen, David A., Karen D., Helenka, Kaiser Bosch, Brigid, Dallas, and Joseph. And we would like to extend a very warm benvenuto, welcome to new Patreon supporter, Edward J. Welcome aboard, Edward. If, like them, you want access to extra content and ad-free episodes, you too can become a Patreon by going to ahistoryofitaly.com, clicking on the support page, and then on the Patreon link. If instead you just want to get in touch, say hello, and drop a line, you're more than welcome to do so. Such as Jay, who has just been visiting Sicily and decided to drop an email to let me know about his experience there, recognizing stuff from the podcast. So thank you very much, Jay, for that email. You can, of course, get in touch however you want. hello@ahistoryofitaly is the email, but you can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. Once again, thank you very much. Grazie mille for listening, and until next time, arrivederci.